Welcome to Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast with Robert Hyder. This is a no-fluff podcast where we dig deep into the journey of scaling your real estate investing and wholesaling business and discuss how to break into commercial real estate investing. Robert Hyder here with Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast. For those who don't know me, I'll go through my journey a little bit here. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, a lower middle class family. First member of my family to traditionally go to college. Out of college, I got into commercial real estate finance. It worked out really well. I was one of the youngest vice presidents of commercial real estate lending in St. Louis at the age of 25. During my time, I underwrote over $1 billion in commercial real estate deals. And then transitioned into full-time entrepreneurial real estate investing in 2013. When I got into real estate investing personally, I focused more on real estate rehabs, did some rentals and wholesales as I was trying to learn the wholesaling game. I quickly realized that the wholesaling side of the business was more scalable, focused on that heavy, and over the 6 years had exponential growth. In 2019, we will have purchased over 200 houses for wholesale, as well as running a real estate brokerage that'll do 60 million plus in transactions. We started and have since sold a residential property management company. We made a big transition into commercial real estate deals. We own and manage over 110,000 square feet of commercial space, as well as 60 plus residential doors. And the reason I go through all this for you guys is to get into the mission of this podcast, the real reason that I'm here. This is for next level thinkers. We're going to be talking about the newest ideas, the most innovative stuff. We're going to be talking about the 1% and 2% difference, the it factor, the edge, the stuff that really makes some investors great while other investors fail. We're going to be digging deep into work-life balance, mindset. We're going to be having interviews with some of the top folks in the industry, both in the residential and commercial real estate investing sectors, as well as high-level finance guys, maybe even tech guys that have scaled big businesses. If you want to be the best investor that you can be, and you want to get opened up to folks that are doing huge things, how they think, how they make decisions, how they process data, you're in the right spot. All right, guys, we've got a fantastic episode here. We got Tucker Merrihew out of Portland, Oregon, high-end home builder, just coming off selling his highest home sale to date. Also featured on the cover of Oregon Home Magazine. Big stuff. He started a app called Driving for Dollars. I've used it for years, but fantastic app, tens of thousands of users. Really cool story behind that. Talks about his educational platform as well as many other things. Stay tuned. We got good stuff to come here. All right. Well, welcome to Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast. Very excited to have Tucker Merrihew out of Portland, Oregon. Thank you very much for coming on here, Tucker.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me. I saw this podcast pop up a few weeks ago, and I sent you a message. I said, "Man, you're doing a great job." So I'm glad to be here and be a part of your first few episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to have you. You know, we're still in the top 10 or the not top 10, the first 10 episodes. So, you know, still kind of trailblazing a little bit for what we've got going on, and, you know, working what I think is an interesting niche where we're trying to talk to folks who have already got into the real estate investing sector, but are looking to scale, looking to do more, looking to do kind of new and unique things, and, you know, need some more out of it. So, and then obviously folks that are looking to get more in the commercial space or kind of higher end space, and that fits real closely into what you've got going on.
Although I could use some of your depreciation, I'm sure, on my tax return.
I can help with that. Give me a holler. Well, we've been doing some cost seg and all kinds of fun stuff. But yeah, well, hey, if you don't mind, why don't you dig in and give us a little 2 or 3 minute clip on your journey and kind of how you've gotten to where you are and a little bit of where you are.
Sure. I mean, obviously we know each other pretty well, but I'll kind of give a quick recap for, your listeners. But, I got out of college in 2002, and originally I was going to go a different direction, some form of financial services type business. I know you kind of started in that world too. But I had it was like a 3-pronged interview, and I passed 2 of them. The last one, I don't know, the guy that did the interview just didn't like me very much. And so I had an offer, it was retracted, So then I was left leaving college, that last semester you're in college, like, oh, I got a job, I know what I'm doing with life. And then all of a sudden I didn't. And so I thought, well, shit, what am I going to do? Right. And so back then it was kind of the very beginning of the mortgage heydays, when just anybody and everybody kind of got into the mortgage business, which ultimately led partially to the real estate collapse. But I found an ad in this thing called a newspaper, which we used to have back in 2002,
Yeah.
a mortgage company that said that they would train you and give you a job, which sounded pretty good to me at that point because I really didn't have a job other than I was delivering Chinese food in my last semester of college. And so they trained me up. I got into the mortgage gig, knowing full well that was going to ultimately just be kind of a launching place to try and get into real estate investing. I always wanted to do that. I was always kind of enamored by the cheesy seminars and things like that kind of came down. Or at least they got my attention, right? Because, they said you could make $1 million in like 2 weeks. And so why wouldn't it? But I got the job with the mortgage company. They trained me up. And then from there, I ended up buying my first house, I think about 3 months into that job. Okay. And it was a pretty unsophisticated buy looking back, but it was a for sale by owner. It was a gentleman by the name of Franco Ferrua, a really strange guy. He had seasonal depression syndrome, or so he said, which basically meant he doesn't like the rain here and he wants to go to California. And so I worked out a deal with him. I believe I bought the house for $240,000. I managed to get myself 100% financing with being in the world of mortgages, and I did have a 740 credit score at the time. So you have a 740 credit score, you get 100% financing. So I did fixed up the house a little bit, moved some friends in, and basically they paid most of my mortgage for about 2.5 years. I sold that house 2005, right before the crash started, or the kind of downward slide started. Mm-hmm. And I made about $200,000, and that was kind of the jump off point. And so from there, I flipped a couple others. I bought just a slumlord duplex along the way too. Flipped that one. It was vacant. Cleaned it up a little bit, put some tenants in it, sold it, made about $80,000 on that one. And so that was kind of the two big, I guess, poker chips that really got me started. Along the way, I continued to do the mortgage game. I eventually opened my own mortgage company from about end of 2005 till 2010. But I really quit doing mortgages about 2008 because that's when the real estate world just collapsed essentially. Right. And but that was a good thing in hindsight, not necessarily for the economy and the world of real estate, but for me, because it allowed me, and you might have had a moment like this too, where, you were probably doing really well in your finance job, but it's like, how do I step away from doing well to do something else? And so that was the moment where I could finally go, you know what? I'm going to step away from this thing that's paying me well, and I'm going to kind of embark full time on the development side and the house flipping and the real estate investment side. And so that was mid 2008. I said, you know what? I'm handing over the keys to the mortgage company to my partner at the time, who held our Washington license, and I didn't actively originate any more loans. And I started what is now TTM Development Company, and that was I guess end of 2008 was when I officially filed the paperwork, and here we are staring at 2020 here next week. So it's been a good ride.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, so I didn't realize some of those pieces. I mean, so your first flip was a $200,000 profit, huh?
Yeah, it was. I got really lucky in hindsight in some ways. In other ways, I used some of the, I guess, techniques that you probably should at any point in a real estate cycle. Is I bought the crappiest house in a nice neighborhood. So that was the first house that I bought. I still live in a place called Lake Oswego right now, which is a suburb just south of Portland. But it was at the time a little crappy white house that was surrounded by homes that were worth much more. The house had a lot of issues, and I got really lucky selling that thing for what I sold it for, to be honest with you. But it was at the, the run up and just the mania of buying real estate. So yeah, I bought it for $240, and then I sold it for just under $5, I believe. And so after commissions and some fix up costs and things, I ended up clearing $200,000, and it was tax free. So that was the beautiful thing.
Nice. Man, that's huge. That's holy hell.
And I was 25. So think about a 25-year-old with $200,000 in his pocket. What do you do, right? Well, I went and bought a boat. That's what you do at 25, right?
You still boat? I mean, you've kind of followed that passion, or is that out the window now?
I found out two things with that purchase. Number one, buying a boat is kind of a big waste of money for the most part. But number two is it's a lot better to have friends with boats than to be the friend with the boat. So, I used the hell out of it for better part of a few summers. Because once I sold that house, I moved down to this area called Johns Landing, which is actually where our office is still.
Okay.
And so I lived in a townhome in Johns Landing. There was a bar around the corner, which sounded really good at the time. And then I docked my boat across the street on the Willamette. So you basically just walked across the street and hopped on it. So I had a lot of fun, but at the same time, now that I'm a little bit older and I've kind of checked that box, I'd say it's a lot more fun to have friends with boats than to be the guy with the boat.
Oh, hell yeah. Nope. I'm with you. Well, cool, man. Well, that's a heck of a run up. So you, 12 years kind of actively in the business out of doing the mortgage industry, which is probably a fantastic move for you. Although the mortgage industry's been hotter than hell for a good little run up coming out of the recession. Probably 2012, 2013 on, it's been pretty damn hot, right?
It really has. And I'm sure there's guys that are doing really, really well. And to be honest with you, I just lost the passion for it. That business is just one that it just grinds on you. It's tough. It's just a lot of logistics and a lot of paperwork, a lot of audits, a lot of NMLS numbers. It just got to be too much for me. And I just figured, you know what, there's got to be a more enjoyable way to make money in real estate. And so that was the biggest reason why I transitioned. Oh,
that's awesome. So let us know a little bit about what you got going on now. We talked about it a little bit before the show started here, but you just sold your, I guess, the most expensive spec house in Oregon for 2019, just under $3.5 million, right?
We did, and that was the most expensive home that we've sold to date as well. We've sold a number with a 2 in front of it, but this one had a 3 in front of it. So for Portland, that's a big number. There's some houses that sell around here that are either on water or have amazing views for around that number, but we didn't have either of those things going for it. So it was a big lot. It was in a very nice area, but it wasn't sitting on water and it didn't have a view. So for those, to not have those things and to sell for what it did, it was a pretty amazing feat. We also were recognized so much that the house is on the cover of Oregon Home Magazine, the issue that's actually coming out this week. So the whole winter issue, it'll be on the cover. Whew. And then put a 6-page spread on myself, my wife, and our company. So that's really cool. We'll get a lot of publicity out of that. It feels good to be recognized for that. But, now our company is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of threefold. We were talking a little bit beforehand. We do wholesale, but mainly just because we have a marketing machine that's constantly going and cranking. And so, even today, like Chris is in the office next to me here and we're working on the 23rd of December. Nobody took the week off. We got a lead in that, we'll probably end up wholesaling. We're going to go see it Friday. I think we can generate a pretty good, $30,000, $40,000 margin on it if we were to wholesale it based on initial conversations. But it's in a part of town we don't necessarily want to hold and do projects in. I'm very precise about where it is that we want to do projects now because I'm pretty involved. I'm not like that guy that steps away and just has everybody run stuff and I never go see projects because I enjoy going out on the job sites. I enjoy seeing the progress. I enjoy seeing where it is that we're investing our money. Mm-hmm. And so we like to do most of our projects in Lake Oswego these days or around there. This would be in Southeast Portland. So I guess to answer your question, we do a fair bit of wholesaling these days just by virtue of the fact that we have constant lead flow coming into our business. We do a fair bit of renovating these days just because I look at that as kind of like the wholesaling is like the fast money. Rehabbing is like the quicker bucket of money. And then building new and development is kind of like the slow money, right? It's a little slower. It's a little longer. Yep. And it's really a cash suck until it's not. Yeah. We try and balance things in that way. And, we were also talking earlier, that house that we sold for just under $3.5 million, it looks great on the P&L now that it's done and we cleared, but that was a 3.5 year or more, investment to get that thing done just due to a variety of challenges and issues. And they're not all like that, but some are, and you have to be able to weather it to get it to the finish line. And so we like to balance risk and just balance cash flow. And if we can do kind of all three of those things, then that seems to be the best. And I try not to do too many big builds or development projects at one time because you can pretty much, you can easily get over your skis if that's the case in terms of commitment and capital. And that's when guys get into trouble. So I'm trying to find the perfect balance between, constantly marketing, finding deals, wholesaling what it is that probably should be wholesaled, and then keeping the ones that are the best and most profitable path to the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you've got a hell of a business going. So how many folks are you up to on the staff?
We've kept it lean and mean. So in the office here, Chris is in the office next to me. He's basically our acquisitions manager, has been for years. He's also our listing agent for a lot of our products. So when we buy stuff, one of the things that we do is, because we do a lot of high-end product, he lists it. Obviously, the company pays a substantially reduced commission, so it kind of limits our outgoing costs or our sell costs on some of these higher-end products. But it also is a great add-on for his job, which he becomes an office manager and a listing agent, so it gives him some good upward mobility there. It allows me to keep people, because that's the one thing I've noticed about this business is that, people are constantly hiring asset managers, and it seems to be a bit of a, conveyor belt or rotating door, right? People come in, people go out. And so one of the things I really pride myself on is that, Chris has been with me for 10 years. Dan has been with me for 7. Who runs the education and technology side of the business. So we have a lot of stick here at the company. It's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, whenever I came out and visited your office and we hung out and did that bus tour a while back and checked out some of your projects. Obviously Chris and Dan were actively involved then. And heck, I don't even know when that was. That might have been.
Oh, God, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. So 16-ish, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Man, it feels like it was longer than that. But yeah, probably. But yeah, that's really cool. So you've got kept it lean and mean, rocking and rolling.
So just to finish answer your question, the only caveat is you met Jerry probably on that trip, who was our project manager. So he was basically running a lot of our projects. At that time, my wife and I we had one kid and we were on our way to a second one, so we kind of needed some help in that side of the business. Eventually Jerry decided he wanted to go do homeowner work, which as a GC I can't say I blame him, because it's got wider margins, right? But you do have a lot more brain damage in people, and they live in the house that you're renovating, and that can be challenging to say the least. So anyway, he left to go pursue a career in being his own GC. And then at that point, Joni, my wife, stepped back in, and so she does all of our project management and design. Chris, like I said, does all of our acquisition management and disposition. And then I kind of do, opportunity management, finance, basically. That's kind of my role in it. And then we've got a couple laborers that we keep that kind of do a lot of the in-between stuff. Because anytime, as you're fully aware, doing remodels, there's a lot of in-between labor. And then, outside of that, with new construction, you can kind of streamline everything with the exception of cleaning. You need the houses cleaned and miscellaneous stuff picked up and things like that. But so we keep 2 laborers on just to kind of help with that, but we sub out everything else. And that pretty much is the business. We've been able to keep it pretty lean and mean and just sub everything else out.
Very cool. Yeah. Because back in, I guess, 2016 or whenever that was, I knew your wife was actively involved on the design and a lot of that stuff, but I don't think she was too terribly involved in the project management. So it's really, really cool to hear that she's that actively involved in the project management stuff. Yeah,
she started, we may have talked about this, we may not have, but she started actually doing all of the custom home builds for a large production builder in town that did production spec, and then they did customs. And so she ran the custom home division for them prior to coming to work for me. And so she's had a lot of experience with that project management side because of that. And so now she I will say she enjoys the design probably more than the project management some days, just because of the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But, now she's segued into doing some social stuff as well. So if you're on Instagram, you can search for @TTM Home Design. She runs that page and puts out all of our design stuff, and she does a hell of a lot better job kind of highlighting the design stuff than I could ever do. But she does all the design and then all the project management as well, which I got to say is a little bit of an advantage, because a lot of these guys, they tend to react better to a woman, whether they're nice or angry.
Sure. Yeah. 100%.
So it works out well. And that's been our process now for, I guess, 3 years or so since Jerry left.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, I love that. I love kind of the families involved. I can tell you, just rehabbing my own home, the contractors seem to, my wife seemed to get more stuff done than I could. They were more positive. They worked harder. They worked longer. It was a better relationship on a lot of fronts. Oh
yeah. It's counterintuitive, but I heard somebody else mention it too, that they had a woman that's running the project management side of their business, and initially the subs, and Joni kind of felt this too. Initially, they don't know whether or not to give you their respect, but after a while, they actually respond a hell of a lot better to women than men. So it's a little bit of a break-in period, but after that, I think the business actually runs better with a woman in the project manager seat.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. So you kind of touched on a lot of really great things there. Kind of you have your kind of today money, your kind of midterm, and then your long term kind of projects. Have you scaled much into the rental market? I know a handful of years back, you and I talked about it a bunch, but you know the properties out in your area were really tough, and you were looking at other areas and things like that.
Yeah, it's challenging. I go back and forth on it a lot, but to this point, I've just kind of kept the adage that in terms of single families, it's a hell of a lot easier to sell them right now than it probably will be at a few years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just been taking money off the table to this point and not adding, really any units to the portfolio. I have a decent sized portfolio that I bought in the last run up.
Yeah.
And it took this long to realize the gains that I would get from one flip, basically. But it's been a good amount of depreciation that I've been able to take every year on my tax returns. But I haven't actively added to the portfolio too much. I plan on doing it as we kind of move into whatever the next cycle is within the market. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's tough. Like, you can't get anywhere close to a 1% rule around here for rent. You're lucky if you can find a 0.5%.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
really at the end of the day, what that translates to is you're putting a lot of money down. So you're liquidating a lot of cash in order to get a decent spread, in terms of debt service versus rent. Or you're really just getting a tax deduction more than anything, because at the end of the day, if 1 month of rent is gone or something needs fixing, that pretty much eats up a lot of your cash flow for the year. So I know in St. Louis you can buy stuff for like 50 grand and rent it for $500, but not so much around here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I prefer your market a little bit as it relates to that, especially with the spreads that you got. But yeah, the rental market here is we've got options on that side.
It's tougher. I'd like to get into more multifamily. It's challenging though too, because we have rent control here. So like at statewide level, and which just happened this past year. So a year ago, if we were doing this show, I would have said, hey, we're under contract for a 25 unit complex. I'm pretty stoked about it. The guy hasn't raised rent since 2000, and there looks like some upward mobility here in terms of valuation of what it could be. Well, that went from a 2-year reposition to a 5 or 6 year reposition based on the rent control that's been instituted in the state of Oregon. So I kind of pulled out of that deal because I didn't know how that was going to ultimately affect value too, because we've had a real big drop off in the amount of commercial investment in the multifamily world because of those rent control caps.
I bet. Yeah.
And so I wanted to see how that all shakes out because, as we were talking ahead of time, keep Portland weird, man. It's getting a little strange out here. There's a lot of real kind of anti-business, types of policies that have come into play. Rent control on a statewide level is one of them. As I also mentioned, there's a city, the one that I live in, Lake Oswego. You tear down a house, they tax you 15 grand. Doesn't matter if the house was built in 1850 and it's falling down. Doesn't matter if it's built in 1950 and it's in good shape. They tax you 15 grand just to get the demo permit for it on top of the cost to turn it down. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just trying to figure out how this all ultimately affects real estate value and affects the real estate market. And so with the world of multifamily, I just wanted to see, okay, is there going to be a big pullback in the amount of people that are wanting to invest in rental units here? And then how's that going to affect the market? On top of that, too, I don't know what your guys' is, if Missouri is more of a landlord-friendly or tenant-friendly state, but here we can't evict anybody at any point, even if they don't have an active lease anymore. If we want them to leave before 90 days, we have to pay them 3 months of rent. And even then, we have to wait. If we do it legally, it's a no-cause eviction, means basically you just ask them to leave and they don't want to leave. You have to wait 90 days and you still have to pay them a stipend for moving costs. So it's a challenge here, man. It really is. And I'm not big on investing away from where I know. Not to say that I won't be at some point, but these are just kind of the things that we're kind of jousting with and the reasons why I haven't gone full bore into that world yet.
Man, yeah, that's a whole new ballgame. Those are game-changing regulations that'll just totally change the paradigm. You're stuck in quicksand there a little bit.
Yeah,
it's
really
unbelievable.
It really is. But on the flip side, we've looked at, okay, so how do you balance out your real estate investing business, right? Because, you guys have a sizable rental portfolio. I'm sure that delivers a nice amount of passive income on a monthly basis, or as passive as it can be, right?
Sure.
And so for us, we decided, okay, what can we do to deliver the business some more predictable, reoccurring revenue? And so we opened up an education division, and that's been really good for us. Not only just in meeting people and connecting, even with people like you, but it's also been a great form of, I guess, as passive of income as you can get for the business. So we look at our education business or the side of the business almost as like a rental portfolio.
Sure.
What it does revenue wise. We don't get the depreciation to offset that revenue, but we at least get that predictable monthly revenue coming into the business.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. How's the education platform, or how's the education business kind of scaled up? Like how did it start, and what's it look like today?
So it started with just kind of we'll call it, right now the landscape for mastermind seems to be a very popular word, right? There seems to be about a gazillion of them. Some of them are very good. Some of them, I don't know, they're probably all across the board, but there's a fairly large gap in terms of cost, right? So you've got your in-person masterminds, which are anywhere between $20,000 and $35,000 a year, and then you've got travel on a quarterly basis on top of that usually. And, really it's kind of success by proximity and something like that, right? You're around people that can afford to be there, and it's well worth it in that regard. But there's a lot of people out there that maybe can't make that investment, whether it be just to join or to, take off away from, kids and family and whatever else. So we built an online mastermind that we've had in place for 6 years now. And, that's been very successful for us because it's very inexpensive to be a part of. And, we've had a lot of people that have kind of, we still have a lot of original members, but it's a good place for people to start, get some competitive advantages, really get the right direction. They have access to me. We can kind of point them, make sure they're doing the right stuff. They're not just spinning their wheels. And, there's been a lot of people that have gotten a lot of great traction for being a part of that. But really the main driver for us as far as predictable revenue from that side of the business is, our online mastermind group. And then from there, we also created, I partnered with another individual that actually we partnered because he was in that mastermind group, but we started a high-end coaching program as well, which is just basically more one-on-one time. And I know that you said you've been doing a little bit of coaching as well, but when you get into the one-on-one world, it's a lot more time intensive, which is really why the cost is more. I know a lot of people are like, oh, people are charging so much money for education and this and that, but it's like, if you're going to sit down with you or you're going to sit down with me for, multiple months, week in, week out, and we're going to dump our, thoughts and, blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make you successful, that's got to cost something, right? Otherwise, it's like, why would we do it? And so we have another program that's basically that, where we sit down and we essentially build out people's marketing machines for them. We execute the marketing for them, and we kind of help them go through the process of getting to, figure out this direct to seller marketing game.
Sure.
It can be a big black hole that you dump money into. And, at the end of the day, you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong. And you don't know if results are just around the corner or whether or not you just pissed all your money away. There's a lot of these things that you don't know, and you can go to YouTube University and you can watch all the videos you want. But the reality is that until you start spending money on marketing and you have leads coming in, none of that stuff really sticks. None of it really is of value. You have to have somebody there that says, yes, you're doing the right thing, or no, don't have that conversation with them, or yes, you need to follow up with that lead. Yes, there's opportunity there. You just don't see it. Like, those are the kind of the intangibles and the things that are of extreme value that people pay for when they're in the higher end program. So we basically have an entry level online mastermind group, and then we have a higher end program. And those are our two main revenue streams for the education side of the business.
Man, that's fantastic. And Dan runs the majority of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Dan is the guy that's much smarter than me when it comes to anything tech. But yeah, he runs all the admission and just the constant, whatever's required, which, by the way, it's a full-time business. For those people that think that you can just kind of splinter off and do coaching or create a mastermind group and also do everything else that you do, it's virtually impossible if you want to do it well. You really have to have a dedicated staff person, to do that and to grow it. And so he's been the dedicated staff guy for that for going on 6 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a mistake a lot of folks make. They think they can just kind of bolt it on and do it on the side, and it'll take a few hours, and that's just simply not the case. If you want to have a couple one-on-one students, you can probably knock that out on the side. But if you actually want to scale it up and do something with it, it's so much more. And even just kind of lining everything up, taking the notes, doing the follow-up, making sure that they're on track. There's just so many steps to it that I think people vastly underestimate the amount of time and effort that takes.
Really do. And the other thing, probably the biggest thing I've learned, and I don't know if you've kind of seen this as well in the coaching you've done, but this is a very simple business really when it comes down to it, right? We market, we talk to people, we buy property, we sell it for a little more, whether we force appreciation or we just get a great deal. That's, in theory, that's this business, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But the challenge that I've found is that people get in their own way a lot. And whether it be self-doubt or whether it just be unsure or whether it just be poor sales abilities or whether it be the inability to recognize value or just being scared, of kind of taking that next step and that next leap, most of the time is just spent kind of, decluttering people's brains so they can get out of their own way. Because, this is a simple business, but people are complex, human beings are very complex. And so it's just kind of making people get out of their own way and letting them find success. That's been what I've found is really the core value when you build an education division.
100%. You hit the nail on the head. It's a really, really easy business in the beginning. And if you're not adding value to assets, if you're not doing new home construction or big rehabs or whatever it might be, at the end of the, at the beginning of the day, I guess, or at the net, it's sales and marketing, right? So it could be a car you're buying and selling. It could be anything. It just happens to be a house. But folks are always getting tripped up on the same stuff or thinking they're spending too much here and they cut a marketing channel and you're like, man, you were getting 6-to-1, 7-to-1 return on that marketing channel. Why are you cutting it? Oh, because this, for the silliest reason, they're not seeing the big picture. They're not seeing the impact or, maybe it's not producing enough leads, but as long as it's producing at that kind of level, keep that going and then find another channel that's producing, at the quantity you need. Don't cut that one. So we run into that all the time. And I'm sure a handful of years back, I was probably making the same mistakes and just didn't quite know it yet,
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. It's been a fun ride though, for sure. But the more that I do it, the more I recognize that that's really the value that coaching provides is just kind of, it's just reassurance. It's like having a partner that knows what they're doing to make sure that you follow the right path and you don't veer off.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's cool to hear. That's really neat. So let's talk about your app for a little bit because you've been scaling that thing up and then we'll get to the real sticks and bricks, the real stuff you got going on. But I was super impressed to hear the quantity of users you guys have. You're up to 22,000 users on the Driving for Dollars app?
Yeah, we are, which, for a niche little app, that's a good number, for really what it is. It's been a journey building that thing. There's no question. It's been, a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 2 steps back, 1 step forward. Getting into the app space, as we chatted about a little bit, it's, you have to have reliable people and you have to then also balance having it be affordable, to not only build it, but to maintain it too. I think a lot of people get into the technology side of the business. They're like, oh, I want to build this piece of technology. And they really have no idea what it's actually going to cost to build that thing out. And then they really don't think about, okay, well, what do we need as far as a customer base in order to make it sustainable? Because you can't just build technology and they will come, right? You got to build it. You got to maintain it. You got to take care of the customers. You got to deal with customer feedback. There's all those types of things. And so for us, I would say that the biggest mistake that we made, although we would have done it anyway, is that we decided to build an app on a scale of 1 to 10. We decided to build a level 9 app right away. I wish I would have just built Angry Birds and good. But instead, we decided to build an app that needed like geolocating, and then it needed APIs to tap in different data from different providers, and then have it be able to do it all over the entire country and just all kinds of stuff. So it's been a real learning experience. It's been cool because I can say that I understand the app business pretty damn well at this point. But it's very, very different than the real estate business. Even though, it's real estate related, it might as well be, on a completely different planet in terms of the business itself and the skills and the things that we needed to learn in order for it to be successful.
Absolutely. So when you were building that thing out, right? Because everyone has, just like the education piece, right? Everyone's got a business and they've got it going and they're like, oh, well, it'd be awesome if I could generate some revenue from something else, some kind of bolt-on, which in reality, I guess it is a bolt-on, but it's so drastically different and it's going to suck way more time than you ever thought. But, as you were kind of doing it, how much project creep did you have? Like, I mean, from where you saw, did you have a real clear goal of exactly where you wanted to go? And then how much did you creep away from that and kind of expand the vision of what you wanted to be as you were building it out?
A lot, I guess, to answer your question. It's been a moving target though, too, because, the business has changed a lot overall, right? In terms of like the major players that have got into it, the iBuyers, the things like that. So, for us, what this thing ultimately is, where it it has its most value to society.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's still a moving target because, we're basically a big data aggregator. That's really what we are in terms of like, we have a huge inventory of houses across the whole country. We don't sell this list, but we've built a huge list of houses across the entire country that are investment grade houses, right? Which has never really been done at this scale before. And so for us, we kind of look at it like, well, at some point, that list will be valuable, not necessarily to real estate investors, but there's a whole world out there of algorithms and companies that are trying to value real estate, right? And so it's hard for them to be able to put a value on stuff unless maybe they could insert a list of properties that have been seen with people's eyes that have been ranked in terms of how messed up they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's, I guess, just to kind of illustrate your point, it's a little bit of a moving target in terms of the creep of where this could go and what it could do. But right now, its core function is really just to make marketing to people that own property easier. And so like we got an email from a guy last week. He said, hey, your little app made me $1 million this year. And I was like, well, that's cool. And obviously we dug into it. We wanted to make sure that was legitimate. He wasn't just, trying to get our attention so that we talked to him or whatnot. And,
right.
Story out there, but we dug into it. Wall Street Journal did an article on him, and he basically was down in Florida, and he went around some of these towns that were affected by one of the hurricanes last year, and he used the app to locate the owners, and he cold called them, and he bought a lot of these houses that these people were able to get insurance money and then also sell him the property, and then he renovated them, and he made $1 million last year doing it. So at its core value to our space, it really just expedites and makes it a lot easier to find people who own property, whether it be by mail, whether it be by email, whether it be by phone, so that you can basically just pull up to a property, pin it, run the skip trace on the spot, call them if you want to, if you got the balls. Otherwise, you can run, you can send them a text message, you can send them an RVM, you can send them a piece of mail, you can send them an email, you can do all kinds of things. So it's really a contact app that at its true value or its true function at this point, so that you can find who owns property and how you can have a conversation with them as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's there's a huge use to that. I mean, that's a hell of a story.
And we built it too, because that's what we do. Like, at the beginning of the day, or, at the beginning of this whole adventure, Chris was going around and I was going around, and we had these little, these yellow pads of paper, and we were trying to figure out the most efficient way to write down house address without having to write down the whole address, right? So we'd have like a street name at the top, and then we just write down addresses all the way down it.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd have to hire a high school person to come, basically look up each address, put all the information in an Excel file. And I was just like, man, this is just so tedious and just ridiculous for how much tech is out there. Like, why do we have to do this? And so building the app, it basically cost the same initially to build it for us to use internally as it did to build it for the entire world to use. So that was the original reason why we started it. But now, we're 3 or 4 iterations later and a much more streamlined, better product with also much better data and more robust data. And now it can be used by anybody, across the country. Plus, we also have the trademark on Driving for Dollars, which, is kind of a nice little cherry on top. I don't know, what we'll do with that other than defend it for the time being. But we do have the trademark on Driving for Dollars. So.
Wow, that's a really interesting little niche. I didn't realize that was the case. I assumed that was just standard play. So that's cool. What you don't know what that's going to do yet, but have you had to defend?
Yeah, we've had to defend it a bunch. So some of the competitors that will remain nameless have had changed their name over the course of their existence, because they came into the iTunes store and the Google Play store with the same name. And we had to have our trademark attorney send them a nice little, letter that said, hey, bud, there's this thing called a trademark and you are now in violation of it. So you got to figure out a new name. So, we don't want to necessarily sue anybody, but, it was a 2.5 year, almost 3 year process to get that trademark done. So it's like, we're not going to let you just roll over us and just decide to use a name that we actually went through the, proper channels and the long process to actually get that trademark.
Sure. Holy cow. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, cool. Let's dig into the real estate side of it. You're just coming off of selling your most expensive project to date, just about $3.5 million, and on the cover of Oregon Home Magazine, and rocking and rolling. Let's talk about that kind of that journey. Kind of where it started from just doing rehabs to kind of scaling into the new home construction, and then scaling up to doing, projects that you sell that start with the three, which is a whole new ball game, and kind of all the trials and tribulations.
It wasn't overnight. I'll tell you that. And I wouldn't suggest anybody do it. I mean, I know you guys do kind of a vast array of stuff, and that was probably a slow burn to get there as well. But
Yeah.
our business is a little different in that, a lot of investors, they stay in kind of the meat and potatoes price point, right? Like we're the median home price, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they're most protected. If the market adjusts, it's going to adjust the least there. It's got the most buyers. It will absorb the quickest. And, they also generally run a business where they have the same selections that they do over and over and over and over again, right? So it's a very streamlined model. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a very boring model. To me, it's like, it's just boring, right? It's just,
Right.
we're building widgets at that point. Like that's really what this business is. And it's profitable and there's nothing wrong with it, but that's not really the business that I wanted us to run. I wanted us to be kind of a premier single family home builder, renovator, not only in our market, but across the country. And so, every house that we do, we spend a lot of time, in the design, but that's that's been a progression too. We've gotten a lot better over the years because we started renovating crappy little hood houses, and then we graduated to, I still remember when we did the first house that we sold for $750,000. I think it was like mid 2010. And I thought, oh my God, that is it's crazy number, right? Price point. And the
Right.
market was not as, inflated back then in terms of prices overall, but we sold that house in an hour when we put it on the market, and we sold it to a gal that paid cash for it. And that was a real eye-opener for me, because it was like, we did good with the design on that, but that was 10 years ago. So our design skills were not near what they are now. But comparatively to what else was on the market, it was good design and it sold really quick. But it really opened my eyes to the fact that if you can build or renovate an amazing product in a great area, the stuff sells just as easily as that meat and potatoes median home, price point type sale that most investors focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the $3.5 million house that we just sold, same thing, right? It's a house that really doesn't exist in that price point. And it was great design. It was a fantastic area. It was a great lot. It was a great house. And it sold with 0 days on market. Most expensive spec home in all of Portland sells with 0 days on market for 2019. That's so. A lot of investors, they focus on trying to mitigate risk by staying in certain price points and running a business a certain way. I kind of mitigate risk by being much better at what we do than most people, and being able to recognize, okay, if you're going to play in these higher price points, what lots should we be building these houses on? What lots should we be not? What streets should we be building on? What streets should we be not? Because, when you get at a higher price point, just because you can comp something for a higher number doesn't mean that it should be that higher number, right? Like there's a big variance in what things are worth. At a certain point, it's worth only what somebody will pay, not what it could comp for.
100%. Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, it's been a long progression, but I want our business to be one that we're a little bit different. We don't just look at it trying to streamline everything and do the same thing over and over and over again. We really want to be recognized as the premier home builder, not only here in Portland, but nationwide.
Man, that's awesome. So 2010, doing $750,000 house, you're blown away that it sold so fast, and someone came in and paid cash. And I guess it opened your eyes up a little bit. And now we're coming on 10 years later, 9 years later, 9.5 years. And kind of what's that progression? When did you break the $1 million price point?
Let's see. The first, we sold a couple just under $1 million in 2012. And then we said, screw it, let's do a big one. The next one we sold was actually the Street of Dreams. We built in the Street of Dreams for Portland in 2013, and we sold that one for just under $2 million. So we more than doubled our price point, or just about doubled it there within about a year's time. And so, but we didn't, I can't say that I was just like throwing caution to the wind and diving into that, crazy higher end pool. We spec'd that house initially at being like a 1.3, 1.4 house.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time went on and as it just things change when you get into these projects sometimes in terms of what the market will pay. That was a drastic change. But when we initially bought that lot, the road wasn't even in. The lot, you couldn't really even see where the lots were going to be platted. And then the finished product is, 9 houses on this amazing street that, one of the houses actually, CJ McCollum, one of the Blazers, bought the house next door to the one that we built just recently here. So well, my point is it had a great look and feel. And so it elevated the price, and we proofed a price point that didn't previously exist in any of that area. So,
yeah.
We got a little bit of run out of that we didn't think we'd get. But yeah, that was the first one that we did with closer to that $2 million range.
Ooh, so all right. So you jumped from under $1 million to $2 million real quick. And then from that point, did you say, hey, you know what, that's about where we're going to be? Or did you kind of tiptoe in and throw in some smaller ones, and then kind of keep punching up? Or what did the journey look like? Because you said that was what, 14?
13. Yeah, that was 13. So okay. It was kind of horizontal from there. I mean, most of, the higher end realtors in town here would say like that 1.5, 1.6 range in the right areas is like a pretty healthy price point. There's a lot of buyers there. Once you start stepping into that $2 million world, it thins out a little bit, but there's a lot of people coming up from California or have sold, something somewhere else, and they can get into that 1.5 range. So we did a good number in that range, 1.4 to 1.6, let's call it. And then we jumped up and we did a couple in the 2 range. And those actually, the ones that we did up in the 2 range, they were lower 2s. They sold, one of them with no days on market too. So we just started to see this pattern of, if you build this really nice product on the right lot in the right area, at least for our market here, we have a big influx of California buyers, and they'll come up and they'll buy that right away because, they just sold some rinky-dink house in the Bay Area for $3 million, and they're going to come buy the Taj Mahal for $2 million,
Right.
So,
yeah.
So we have a weird little phenomenon going on here in terms of that. And then if you wanted to go up to Seattle and you buy in Bellevue, which, I kind of compare Bellevue to Lake Oswego. Bellevue's, just outside Seattle. Lake Oswego's just outside Portland. And Bellevue is about 1.5 to 2 times the price of Lake Oswego. So for the same weather, you could pay 1.5 to 2 times the price for the same type of community and amenities that you get in Bellevue as you do in Lake Oswego. So I feel like we're pretty protected in doing that. But we also get a lot of people that they come up from California, they look at Seattle, and they go, you know what, Lake Oswego just south of Portland looks pretty damn good for the price right now.
Well, that's fantastic. So you obviously you've been scaling up that price. How many deals are you selling a year? Obviously I know at that price point, they take a lot longer to get built, but once you kind of get that cycle going, right, at some point that they start to fall on a somewhat repetitive basis. So how many are you bringing to market and selling a year these days?
In the, let's call it 1.5 to 3 million range, we're probably like 6 or 7 houses a year. Okay.
That's more than I would have guessed. That's an impressive quantity at that price point, So
yeah.
What's the building time, obviously the lot purchase and getting your entitlements and everything is a very timely phase in the cycle. But from the point where it's like, okay, we can build to sold, what's that timeline look like?
It really varies. Like the biggest, I guess now what we try and focus on is 1 down, 1 ups, because if you get into the partition game here, I don't know how long it takes in your area, but it's like 12 to 15 months here. And that's where we really get strung out and hung up. And, that can throw a big wrench in our cash flow game, right? So sure. for us now, if we're going to do the partition game, it can take, let's say, 12 to 15 months, depending on backup for surveyors and county and things like that. And then once you get to that point, it's about 6 months from build to finish. So anytime we can start building to finish, it's about 6 months. So if we do a 1 down, 1 up, which is basically tear one house down, build one in its place, we're buying the house, we're tearing it down, we're getting our plans ready, and then we start going. So that getting plans ready and tearing down the house is usually about 2 months, let's say, and then you build in 6. So it's about an 8-month turn if you sell it right away on the other end.
Okay. And then from buying it to getting it torn down and having your plans, what's that timeline look like? Well, I guess a better question would be from idea, you got the property under contract, to sold. What's that total time frame?
Let's call it 8 months generally.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it is 8. Okay.
Yeah. Most of our stuff sells pretty quick. We had one this year that it took a longer to sell, but that was one of those where you learn a valuable lesson, which is if you buy next to anything commercial, go talk to the people and see if they're about ready to sell that building to a multifamily developer to turn it into a 40-unit apartment complex.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we had a church that they had basically they owned this big chunk of land in Southeast Portland, and then right across the street from the church, they had kind of their commercial building that they ran the enterprise of the church from for the last like 40 years, right? Or maybe even longer than that. And so, you live next to a commercial building that people only work at during the day on the weekdays, and it's dormant the rest of the time. Not a big negative when selling a single family house. But if that same building then becomes a 40-unit apartment complex that's mid-construction when you finish your house, makes it a lot more difficult to sell. So we took a bit of a beating on that. We had to, take the price down quite a bit, and ultimately we ended up selling it. But yeah, that was a challenge.
Oh, yeah, I can see. So yeah, I must have misunderstood what you said earlier. So yeah, from the point that you get that property under contract to buy, get it tore down, permits, plans, everything to sale, that's 8 months.
Yeah, probably about 8 months. And then that would extend, like the story I told you, if for whatever reason market doesn't absorb it quickly, or you get, you make a mistake or you price it wrong or whatever. Yeah.
Sure. That's a quick turn. I would have thought.
Compare and contrast that with rehabs, right? Rehabs can be anywhere from 2 to 4 months, right? From entry to exit. So, at about half the time, maybe a third of the time, you can get in and out of rehabs depending on the scope and size of rehab, obviously, but that's why I consider it kind of a quicker bucket of money.
Sure. So how many rehabs are you guys doing a year?
Probably about the same. So
okay.
we're somewhere around 15 total projects a year for stuff that we keep.
Man, that's great though. Well, that's very, very cool.
Which isn't like overly sexy. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I do 100 projects a year and this and that. And it's like, wholesaling, it's a high volume business, obviously. But if guys that are doing like 40 rehabs at once, like that's a tough game, man. And we did higher volume for a while, and I'd probably end up divorced based on the way my company's set up, just to be honest. It's a high friction game when you do that. And so for us, I'd rather just do higher margin and less projects than to do more projects at less margin, because it puts so much friction on so many different parts of the business. And for me personally, I just don't want to run the business that way. But we're also fortunate in the price points that we get to play in, that it gives me that leeway. I have choices where some guys, they just don't have those choices. They have to do it one way.
100%. Yeah. And obviously we do a good amount of wholesaling. We'll do just under about 200 houses this year on the wholesale front. So, and it's, just whenever you're doing anything at that quantity, there's a lot of things that can break. You're just moving a lot of stuff, right? You're just pushing a lot of cogs through the engine. And the same, and you're just kind of buying and selling, right? So but you have a lot of steps. But I can't imagine doing 40, 50, 100 rehabs, having to manage the construction and all the contractors and occupancy inspections and all of that at that quantity would blow my mind. I'm super impressed that folks are able to do it, but that's 100% not for me.
I'd need a whole bunch of bottles of Just for Men to get rid of all the gray that comes from that.
That's it, man. That's crazy. I'm impressed by those folks. Well, cool. So what are some of like the big takeaways, the big lessons, the things that you could pass on as great advice as you've scaled up and are doing the quantity that you're doing? Obviously from actual deal quantity, it's not crazy, but when you actually look at the dollar amount and, the level of intricacy that you're kind of putting into these, that's super impressive. So what are some of the things that you've learned that you wish you would have known 3, 4, 5 years ago?
There's a fair bit, but I guess just to quantify like dollar amount, like the last 3 houses we've sold is a combined just under $6 million worth of inventory, right? So like, a lot of guys got to do 30 houses to get to those numbers, right? So that's just so people can kind of understand, like at the end of the day, it's really about volume sold, because that's what you're generating profits off of, right?
For sure. 100%.
For us, that's kind of how, just so they can understand my logic. But in terms of like the things that we've learned, I guess to play off that, you really got to build a business that you want to build. I think there's a lot of mantras out there, and like a lot, social media can be a dangerous thing, right? In terms of glorifying certain business models and certain ways of doing things. And, what I've learned is that, if you talk to a lot of these guys that are on social that, are beating their chest and showing off what they got going on, their life's pretty fucked up too, behind the scenes. I mean, there's a lot of problems that they have, just like you and I have. It's not all glorious. So, to base the business that you're running off of a way somebody else runs it, or you perceive they run it off social, is just not a good idea. You really got to figure out what makes you happy. What are the pieces that you have in play? What's the best type of business for you to run? And like, for me, my wife works with me, right? So if I want to do 40 rehabs at a time, it's probably going to be a bit of a challenge, right? Or I'm going to have to hire another project manager. So instead, I just decide, let's do higher price point, and that works for me. And we can also build a better product. So the biggest thing is like, figure out what type of business makes you happy, in this business. Because God, there's a million ways to make $1 million in real estate. It's like, people say they're in real estate. Are you doing self-storage? You doing apartments? You doing commercial? You doing fix and flip? You doing wholesale? You doing, what is it that you want to do? I think that's a difficult thing for people to figure out. But once you figure that out, just figure out the business that makes you the happiest. Like, what do you want your business to look like? And I think that that's probably the number one thing. And, some of us want to go take over the world, right? And we want to do a gazillion deals, and eventually we figure out that maybe that's not for us, and they end up wanting to kind of tweak that or dial it back or change it slightly. And I see a lot of like newer guys that are very hungry, right? And they're kind of taking on all these things and doing all these things. And it's like, it's a little frightening because I'm staring at 40 next week. But I look back at me like 10 years ago, and I'm like, that was me, But the reality is that everybody has to kind of go on their own journey. But eventually, most people will kind of come to realize that you don't have to do everything. Just figure out what it is that you want to be really good at and actually gives you happiness in this business, and really focus on that, I think.
No, that's huge. So yeah, kind of figuring out kind of a lifestyle based business, or figuring out what you really want to get out of the business, so that you're not letting the business kind of dictate your life while you have the opportunity to build it. No, that's huge. And doing the quantity that's maintainable, that allows you to still enjoy it, and you're not so damn stretched that you're going crazy. And I'm sure you have crazy weeks like everybody else, but if more weeks are good than not, then you're better off,
Yeah. And, the bigger your business gets, the more people you got to manage, and the more people you got to manage, the more challenges you have. So, I mean, you got to look at yourself too and be like, okay, are you wired for that? Right. Or are you wired for, the stress that comes with running a bigger business? And I mean, I'm sure as time's gone on, your bandwidth and ability to deal with stress has improved and increased, just like mine. But, you can't expect that a 28-year-old kid is going to be able to do really well running a big, multi-million-dollar wholesale operation that's spending $200,000 a month on, marketing, right? Like, at a certain point, he's only had so much runway, and his, he can only handle so much before he cracks, or, whatever else happens, right? So, it takes time, to get good at this business, and ultimately figure out what it is that you really want from it. And, I think that I figured that out for me, and, I'm sure that you have for you to some extent. I mean, we're all works in progress, but at least I know what the core thing that I want to get out of this business is every day.
100%. And a lot of folks, they watch, and you hit the nail on the head there with Instagram or social media or whatever it might be, but they see what other folks are doing, and they say, yeah, I want to do that. And then, okay, well, I need to have 5 acquisition guys and 2 dispo guys, and I need 2 project management teams, or 2 teams to run projects. And, and they maybe have no experience managing people or having any leadership skills, which is a huge piece that no one touches on when they're talking about scaling like that. Those are big variables that will make the difference between that rollout being successful or not, just solely on those variables outside of everything. I mean, they could be the right people that are managed or led the wrong way that bring total failure to the business.
I was a horrible boss at, when I had my mortgage company at 28, 29, 30, like I was not good at being a leader of the company. And I don't think anybody is at that age. I mean, it just takes time in the seat. You got to get good at those things before you really start piling all kinds of money and stress and pressure on top. But, that's just the journey of entrepreneurship, at the end of the day. So, yeah,
figuring it out and keeping the ball moving forward down the field with while you're trying to figure it out, that's a big variable. So as you've been going through that, have you had, my guess is the more folks, or the more you do, the more success you reach, the more successful folks you hang out with. Are you intentionally talking to folks that are more successful? Are you intentionally surrounding yourself with more successful folks and trying to get ahead from that angle to learn more about business and kind of just maybe get a leg up or get some kind of mentorship from those relationships?
Yeah, I try to. It sounds really shitty, but at a certain point when you step into this world of entrepreneurship, like you're almost living a different life than a lot of your friends. You really are. You go, like if you go, I'm sure you've been to a few Christmas cocktail parties, or holiday parties, and it's very different. For me, it's difficult to just kind of do the hobnob, small talk, oh, thank God it's the weekend, I'm done with my job. It's hard to, you can have friends like that. I'm not saying you should, but it's very hard to relate to people like that beyond a certain level because they live a very different life than you and they just can't understand a lot of the challenges, pressures, stresses, your mind constantly wandering about you want to do this or that with the business, on like, why in the world would you be thinking about that on a Saturday night, right? But it's just, that's how we're wired and it's just the way that we are. So I think, yeah, trying to surround yourself with as many people, that are like that as possible is good. But also maybe people that are a little further down the line that can give you some direction on, how they navigated that path in their life. That's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think ultimately entrepreneurs need to be around other entrepreneurial types, just to kind of fill a void, right? In terms of just, human interaction. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it's super important. I think that, the more successful people that you can be around, it's also more inspiring, right? Like, that's why I sent you a message. And I was like, hey man, that's awesome. You're doing the show. I think it's going to be a big hit for you because I really do. And it's inspiring for me to know people and see people that are just taking action and doing things. Cause there's so many people that don't, and it's for me, like, I kind of thrive off of knowing and being around people that are also just trying to make something more of their life every day. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got some friends that, are starting new businesses and they're marketing them on social media. And my wife's like, oh man, you like all of their posts. You're doing all this. I'm like, well, yeah, they're out there taking action. They're trying to do it. They've got a million headwinds. Least I can do is, kind of talk them up a little bit. Cause I know how miserable and lonely that process is. It's a tough road.
Yeah, it's entrepreneurship's, it's kind of like parenthood. Like you shouldn't know what it entails until you're in it because you'd probably never do it,
100%. That's actually the best example I think I've ever heard of entrepreneurship. It's like, if you knew, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. There are so many great pieces that come out of it, but if you knew how tough it was going to be, you probably wouldn't have jumped into it out of the gate. It's one of those few times where it's just, ignorance is definitely bliss, and you just have to have the skill set to be able to maintain and run. It's a fantastic way to put it.
I'm glad I got a one-liner for you in today. So
there you go. That's what we're gonna name the podcast. That episode's gonna be named that. That's fantastic. Well, cool, man. Well, we're gonna roll it in here. Just a couple quick things, and we'll get going. But what you've been really successful, and you've done some really, really cool things, and I've loved to kind of keep up with it and watch it happen and then get to know you along the way. But what do you think, kind of as you dig deep, dig internally, like what do you think's that it factor for you, that thing that makes you 1 or 2% better from all of your competition, that makes your deals just sell quickly and push price and, be able just to kind of outperform a lot of the other folks in the industry doing the same thing that you do? What is it about you?
I think the first thing is, I just get up every day and just keep going forward. I keep trying to punt the ball further down the field every day. I rarely have days where I just am like, I can't do it today. I can't get out of bed. I just don't. But I also have focused in on the type of business that I want to run. And I try not to have shiny ball syndrome too much because, I know a lot of people that are doing, a lot of things. I've got a buddy that, he's doing like $200 million worth of multifamily in Hollywood. Right. And, he's doing really, really well. And, but that's his business. That's his core competency. That's the thing that he does. Right. And so for us, the thing that we do and that we're really doubling down on is just trying to be the best builder, in terms of design and just recognition and what it is, the product that we build, not only here in Portland, but nationwide, and trying to do different things to try and, put a magnifying glass on that. And so, I think focus is a big thing. We can definitely lose focus easily as entrepreneurs, and especially in real estate, because you think everybody else is making more money and you're doing something else. But the reality is that if you just get really damn good at one part of this, the rest will take care of itself. And you can always go buy an apartment complex, somewhere if you want to, right? So, or a commercial building or whatever it is. So, and if that's your thing, great. That's, what you should double down on and really do. But I think focus is a big thing. You really need to pick your poison, as they say, and try not to have too many of those days where you just lie in the fetal position in bed. Make sure you get out of bed and make it to the office. Just keep pushing forward.
Just get up and forge forward. No, that's fantastic. I mean, obviously you guys have always been very focused. One thing that I've known about you is, and I haven't gotten to meet your wife, but it's been easy to see that, the design element, the build design connection, it has been very, very intentional from the minute that I've seen your product and seen the houses, and just obviously you guys take a lot of pride in that. So anytime you can take that much pride and really have it there to show, it's going to continue. It's going to kind of fully roll out in the entire project. So I think that's probably a big one, not overarching 10,000 foot view, but that's in the trenches every day that is making you guys better than almost everybody else. Cause it's more so than just, hey, we're going to have a cool design for a business decision. It means something to you guys.
Yeah, it's very intentional. And, like I said, I don't have a lot in common with the guys that just bang out the same house and the same stuff over and over again, other than the fact that we're both looking for cheap property, right? Like that's kind of our overlap. But beyond that, we run very different businesses, which is fine. But again, that's just, that's the business that I've chosen. And I think best suits the way that we're set up and ultimately what we want to do.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, cool. Is that kind of the part that really gets you excited every day about this business? Or is there something else that really gets you kind of going about to take over the day? Rolling
my job is kind of being on the deal finding side. Like I really do enjoy that a lot. We do a lot of marketing and we go meet with a lot of crazy sellers and, but I like the finished product. Obviously everybody does, but I would say probably the beginning and the end are my two favorite parts, finding it. I equate what we do to if I was a caveman, I'd go kill it and drag it home, and then I get it back when it's ready to sell, right? And so that's, those are the two things that get me the most excited.
And full circle, it's the same thing for boat ownership, right? The first day and the last day. Those are the best days to own a boat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, cool, man. Well, I greatly appreciate you coming on. I think it was a fantastic episode. I think we got some really good takeaways, and listeners out there should have some big nuggets there to take home and implement and try and get out of their own way and get out there and rock it. So I greatly appreciate you coming on and giving us some wisdom.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and hopefully I didn't scare anybody off from entrepreneurship. It's all a journey, and we become better people for it. It's just, entrepreneurship isn't a straight line, as we both know. So, as long as you're well aware of that, jump in and make it happen.
Yeah, it's better to know early. It's better to know that it's going to be a rocky road, but it's definitely worth it. And hell, I wouldn't have any other way. So I think
door number two is the way to go. So
absolutely. Well, cool, my man. I greatly appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Woo! All right, guys, that was a fantastic episode. Tucker Merrihew, what a stud. Talks about starting his home building business or his rehabbing business, real estate business in 2008, scaling his high-end home building business. He just finished selling his highest home to date at $3.5 million, featured in Oregon Home Magazine on the cover, along with the 6-page breakdown of the property and his business. Really, really cool stuff. He's doing, really, really high-level things, 5, 6, 7 high-end homes a year he's pumping out, as well as, another, 8 to 10 rehabs, so crazy stuff. Talks about avoiding shiny objects, what some of his shiny objects look like and how they look now. He's had success with them, but they were uphill battles. The app's up to 22,000 users. He's got his educational platform, really worked well, but talks about kind of what to avoid as it relates to that, and defining his core strengths, what to kind of build your business around, how he looks at it, and hopefully there's some pieces there that you guys can really apply to your businesses. Well, hopefully that was as good for you guys as it was for me. Until the next one, look forward to it. Hey guys, as always, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Bottleneck Real Estate Virtual Assistants. These guys are fantastic. We've been using them for years in our business. They've really helped us scale. Hopefully you guys like them as much as we do. If you want to get in touch, it's bottleneckrealestate.com, bottleneckrealestate.com, and I think you will be very happy with them. If you got some good quality content out of that, if you think it would help anybody, please go to iTunes or SoundCloud or whoever you're listening to this on and subscribe to the podcast. Also, please give us a 5-star rating. It really helps get us out there. If you do subscribe and give us a 5-star rating, take a screenshot of it, email it over to info@robertheider.com, Robert, HEYDER.com, and register for you guys to win a free one-on-one coaching session with myself or one of our guests. They were nice enough to give up some of their time, so thank you for that. Also, please follow us on social media, Robert_Heider at Instagram, Robert_Heider at Instagram. We'll drop some really quality content there. Also, I almost forgot, if you guys want a free commercial real estate guide and commercial real estate analysis tool, just go to the website, robertheider.com, fill out that brief little form, and we'll email that over to you. It's a really, really good tool just to be able to analyze deals quickly, understand kind of what's going on, see if it's actually a deal. All right, guys, thanks. Until the next one.